Okay, I guess that we are online. So excuse for this kind of, it's the first time we are starting this. Welcome to the world after coronavirus. This is the first, we call it TV because we love retrofuturism, and our first guest tonight also loves science fiction. So this is the reason why we called it like that. As you can see in my little studio, everything is more or less like the movie Be Kind, Rewind. With zero money, we organize this, and we have a beautiful program every day at this place for the weeks to come. Our first guest tonight is, as you know, Yanis Varoufakis, one of the founders of DiEM25, the Democracy in Europe movement, which organized this program, an economist and the leader of the Mera25 party in Greece. But before I give the word to Yanis and invite him, let me just explain what is this about. As you know, we are in a dire global situation. Not everything is dark, but I guess that millions of people in the world who are in self-isolation like me, I am here because you can see it here. I wouldn't have time to do this little thing if I didn't have enough time. So I'm in the 10th day of self-isolation. As far as I know, Yanis is also in self-isolation. Many people are in self-isolation. So we at DiEM25 were convinced that in this time of solitude and alienation between people, we need to get together. So instead of social distancing, we need social cooperation between us. This is the reason why tonight we will have Yanis Varoufakis. The format will be different from time to time. Tonight we will have a 15 minutes introduction on Europe's latest failure by Yanis. And afterwards we have a conversation. We are checking your questions on the YouTube channel. If you want to send questions on Twitter, send it there. If you want to register, I would encourage you strongly, because once you register for this and for the other events, you will get a notification with the live stream link, and you might also be able to pose the questions already. So I'll announce the next guest later, but I can see Yanis is waiting keenly from where? Where are you, Yanis? Hello.
Hello, Srečko. Hello, everyone. Hello, DMers, non-DMers, Europeans, non-Europeans, isolated people. We are maybe stuck at home, but we are not going to be silent. And we're not going to go quietly in a state of isolation. Where am I? I'm in Egina. Egina is a little island. You know it very well. You've been here a number of times. It's the best if you're going to be exiled and isolated anywhere. Well, this is a place to be. And I'm not even in self-isolation, nor are you. Nor are you. You've got Sasha there. Two people you have.
Two people. No. All together it's two people, but it's a self-isolation of two.
Okay, no. It's me, Danai, and Mowgli. Mowgli's a dog. So we are in total isolation, in pristine isolation, I should say. But our mind is with our comrades, fellow Europeans, people around the world, in India, who are in completely dire straits. Because let's face it, this is a unique situation where when you do the things that must be done to stop the spread of the disease, you are condemning those that you are saving into dire poverty. So, we have a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. I'm luckily or unfortunately not in my home country in Croatia, but Croatia yesterday showed that this whole crisis is going into directions which we were not able to imagine this. Namely, yesterday an earthquake happened in Croatia, so all these requests by the government to stay at home suddenly turned into the opposition. Go out, but be at social distance. So the people in Croatia at this moment are in a kind of mass psychosis, waiting for the Godzilla, actually. Today there was a virtual event that they are waiting for Godzilla because they can imagine everything. But jokes aside, the situation is very serious, not only in Croatia, Italy, of course. The lack of solidarity among different European countries is also evident. that disintegration, both of us also warned for years now, is happening in front of our eyes. Borders are closed, internal borders, the external borders. We have state of exception, armies on the streets. We have a very interesting situation. So let's move with, let's go to your short introduction. At that time, we will watch the questions of everyone who is watching us. I hear there are some people from Australia who were awake until 5 o'clock in the morning to watch us, and many other people. And we hope that by this channel, every evening, we will create not only an online community, but the foundations for a world after coronavirus. So Yanis, the title you have chosen is Europe's Epic Failure. Please.
Yes.
Tell us, what is Europe's failure?
All right. Well, let me start with a high impact, but I believe exceptionally accurate statement. European capitalism is suspended. It took a small amount of mindless RNA to show that on our continent, maybe on other continents too, but definitely in Europe, the emperor is not just naked, the emperor is threadbare. We effectively have, I'm serious about that, the suspension of capitalism, because this is not just a crisis. What we have is a simultaneous collapse of the demand side of capitalism, of the market, and the supply. People are staying at home, they're not buying stuff, but at the same time, factories cannot operate, even if they were, if customers were spending away, the supply chains have collapsed, beginning in China and then moving on to Germany, to the Netherlands, and so on. So European capitalism is suspended animation. It's a bit like during the war, except that during the war, take the United States, for instance, capitalism was immediately replaced by the authorities by the war economy. The war economy was in the United States, in Europe, in Britain, in Germany. Capitalism, maybe there was private ownership, but that was only in name, because the factories were confiscated, prices were fixed, quantities were commanded, they were determined by the center. There was no difference between the Soviet Union and the United States in terms of the mode of production, distribution, and exchange. But what we have here is a situation where capitalism has been suspended. It has more or less collapsed, but the European institutions are refusing to move into a war footing, to create the command economy, which is necessary in order to provide the goods and services that are necessary to people, the incomes that are necessary to people. And come to think of it, look at the way in which the European Union Council, the Eurogroup, the European Commission has been treating this crisis. Allow me to draw a parallel. They are treating corporations, even the middle class, as if they are a variety of Deutsche Bank. Because remember, in 2008, when Wall Street went belly up, Deutsche Bank was bankrupt, along with other French, German banks, or actually all the banks. And what did the powers that be do while ignoring the struggling people, both of Germany and of Greece, of France and of Portugal, of Ireland and of Spain? They created gigantic credit lines, masses of liquidity, waves of liquidity, loans, credit lines for Deutsche Bank, for Société Générale, and for the Greek state, the Irish state, not to give to the people of Greece or Ireland, but to give to Deutsche Bank, to refloat the banking sector. Now, this is exactly what they're doing here. If anybody who studied, even in a cursory manner, the decisions of the great and the good in the European Union, the Eurogroup and so on, what you'll see is all the hundreds of millions of billions that are talking about, the trillions that they're suddenly discovering out of thin air. When we were talking about the green transition, they didn't have it. But now, suddenly all these trillions are up again, just like they were in 2008, 2009, 2010. But again, as in 2008, 2009, 2010, the whole point is to provide loans. So what we have, in a sense, we don't have a new crisis. COVID-19, that stupid little RNA, not even DNA, what it did was it exposed the fact that we have the same crisis that we had in 2008, 2009, 2010. It never went away. It just took a small virus in order to bring it out, and to bring it out in a way that is magnificent, horrific, exceptionally large scale. Both that period, the period of the collapse of the banking system and the euro crisis that began in 2008, 9, 10, and this period now, they are characterized by the same large-scale, motivated category error of the European Union authorities. And allow me to just pinpoint it very, very succinctly. They are treating a bankruptcy as if it is an illiquidity crisis. What do I mean by this? If you and I have a business and it's going fine, except that we have a liquidity problem. For some reason, our debtors, people that owe money to us, cannot come up with the money they owe us for this month, next month. So we have a problem of liquidity. But, you know, the health of our company is beyond dispute. Then, of course, if you have a problem of liquidity, it makes sense to borrow. And it makes sense for authorities to give you the money so that you don't have a problem if your problem is one of liquidity. But if it's one of bankruptcy, no bankrupt entity, whether it's a family, an organization, a country, the world, no bankruptcy has ever been overcome through loans. And yet, that is what the European Union authorities did in 2010. They came to Greece, since we're here, and provided the largest loan in history to the most bankrupt state in the world on conditions of austerity that made it more bankrupt. The rest is history, as they say. And of course, the austerity for the many and socialism for the bankers that was practiced back then poisoned Europe. It created all those centrifugal forces that fragmented Europe. And they're doing exactly the same today. They are treating a desperate bankruptcy, when you have companies, large companies in Germany, that are completely laden with debt, totally overwhelmed by debt, because debt was cheap, so they took a lot of debt. Okay, and they had already, before the corona hit, they had a significant drop in demand. German industrial production was coming down by 6% before the virus hit. So you have this situation, and suddenly, all of a sudden, you've got a 50–60% reduction in demand, kaput, the whole thing collapses. And so you have bankruptcies. And how do they treat them? As if they are in liquidity crisis. Again, the same problem. This category error, this motivated error, because then it's not as a result of sheer stupidity. It's motivated, and I'll explain in a minute why I think it's motivated and what the motivation is. That motivated error back in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, led to the political ruptures, of which DiEM25 is one outcome. Remember, Sergio, on the 9th of February 2016 in Berlin at the Volksbühne Theater, we gathered there, we packed the theater, we had tens of thousands of members enlisting. That was the inauguration of DiEM25. And you will recall, of course, what our slogan was back then. Europe will be democratized or it will disintegrate. That's already still the logo of DiEM25. Already that category error of the European Union was causing new divisions, as you said before, new wars were coming up. It only took a few refugees, 1, 2 million? What's 1, 2 million when you have a Europe of 500 million? Crossing the borders after the Syrian disaster and so on. The borders, for instance, started growing taller. Inside our societies, we had the rise of ultranationalism, the Nationalist International. Brexit happened very soon after that, and it was completely, entirely, utterly caused by this category error of the European Union to treat the bankruptcies that European capitalism created as a sequence of crisis of liquidity. We were right to stress back then democracy and the importance of making it abundantly clear to Europeans that either we will democratize this Europe of ours, the European Union, or the European Union will disintegrate. Rosa Luxemburg, remember, once said that without democracy, life in every public institution withers away, becomes a caricature of itself, and bureaucracy rises as the only deciding factor. That's verbatim Rosa Luxemburg. It's what happened to the Soviet Union. It is what was happening in 2015-16 to the European Union. This is why we created DiEM25. Now, speaking of a European Union today, especially not just after coronavirus, but especially after the coronavirus hit, immediately the query comes to one's mind. Union? What union? Green transition? There is no union. We have the Green Deal of the European Commission, which is a joke. They are promising 1 trillion over 10 years. Now they found 1 trillion for the banks within 5 days. They promised 1 trillion for the next 10 years for confronting climate change, of which, if you really look at the details, only about 25 billion exists. So it's a joke. There is no green transition union style. Refugees, just dump them on Lesbos. By the way, as we speak now, Moria and the other hotspots on the Greek islands, they've been completely shut down, and Darwinism is being utilized. Let anyone who survives, survive. This is not the Europe that any European can possibly defend. Debt, it's completely national. Every debtor to himself, and every creditor again to himself. Banks, totally fragmented. Poverty, national issues. The European Union has no policy on poverty. Foreign policy, you put together the words European, foreign, and policy, and you end up with a joke. Defense, what are we talking about? Today we heard here in Greece that the German federal government banned exports of masks and other medical equipment to Greece. We heard something similar happened in Italy. The question is, why is all this happening? Why is it that the Eurogroup convenes, the European Union Council convenes, and they cannot come up with a modicum of a unified approach to the bankruptcy problem? Why do they have constantly to give loans? Look, we explained that when DiEM25 was created. The reason why the European Union was created as it was created was to serve the interests of a cartel of big business back in 1950. And since then, the bureaucracy and the decision-making bodies have been convened for one purpose, to create a top-down political decision-making process, which is presented as apolitical, technical, procedural, and neutral, and rules-based, in order to deny Europeans democratic control over money, over common resources, over the surplus that Europeans are producing collectively before it is appropriated by the cartels. That is the reason. That is why we have the worst form of fanaticism in Europe, which consists of a bureaucracy that keeps repeating the same mistakes, hoping for a different outcome. So let me start wrapping up, because I've got a couple of minutes to go before we start an interesting conversation. So COVID-19 did not cause this crisis. It amplified the existing Euro crisis. And what we need to heal the rift that is now threatening with an existentialist crisis Europe is, as progressives, we need, I believe, to do two things. We need to be bolder, even as DiEM25. COVID-19 has robbed us of the opportunity to be moderate sounding as we have been over the last 4 years. Now, to begin with, we need to overcome any divisions we have amongst progressives between Lexiteers, those who wanted to get out of the European Union because it was a bad idea, and those of us who believed and continue to believe in constructive disobedience from within the European Union. And we also need to start talking post-capitalism. No more debates on how to stop private banks from sucking the living daylights out of society. After 10 years of this comedy of errors, where the banks constantly suck surpluses out of the ones who are producing it, leaving them destitute and now completely at the mercy of a stupid virus, we need to plan to end private commercial and investment banking. We need to move towards a post-capitalist posture, and we need, as DiEM25, And as progressives, we need a more radical program than the one we went to the European Parliament elections with in last May. I remember someone saying once to me, I can't even remember who it was, that when you're right, you cannot be too radical, and when you're wrong, you cannot be too conservative. So allow me to finish, and here's how I'm finishing. We need 4 principles to guide us. No European people can be free as long as another's democracy is violated. This is what we were saying in 2015. No European people can hope for prosperity if another European people is pushed into permanent insolvency and depression. Thirdly, no European people can grow without basic goods, without health, primarily, education, green energy, climate change mitigation for its weakest of citizens. And fourth, no European people can have democracy, proper public health, and education under a regime that can only be described as socialism for the few and permanent austerity for the many, for the environment, for public health. So our message to Europeans today must be unify or die. Come together in shared green prosperity or surrender to the dogs of neo-fascism behind electrified fences. Plan for a common post-capitalist future or prepare for lonely, perilous paths to heartless, fragmented societies. So let us all stay healthy, but also thank the coronavirus for bringing things to a head, from ending the pretense that European Union capitalism can be civilized through the European Union's procedures, to recognizing that even though we are isolated behind 4 walls, we have no right to remain silent.
Thank you, Yanis, a lot for this inspiring speech. So you mentioned post-capitalism several times on the one hand, but you also mentioned fascism or neo-fascism, I think fascism on the other side. I mean, the situation now is very interesting and complex in the sense that on the one hand, you can see in most of European countries now, and now it's starting in the United States, and God knows what will happen in Brazil under Bolsonaro, you can see a state of exception, which then very often goes to curfew, armies on the street, surveillance, geolocation tracking, even without our knowledge, facial recognition, all these measures, which are needed in a way. This is why our situation is getting more and more complex and difficult for progressives, which are needed if you want to slow down, because you cannot stop the contagion, you can just slow it down. So on the one hand, you have this rise towards a possible dystopia, let's put it like that. On the other hand, what I find very interesting, and here I want to ask you this question, is that you can see measures which only 2 or 3 weeks ago would have seen as science fiction, you know, people would say, oh, but this is socialism, you know. You can see Spain nationalizing hospitals. You can see Boris Johnson nationalizing the railway. You can see that suddenly it's possible to stop the repayment of loans, even to stop paying utility bills or rent. You can see that we can cut down carbon emissions. There was a recent study in China that 77,000 people didn't die because of air pollution. So coronavirus, instead of being just an enemy, actually stopped people dying from utter air pollution because the factories and planes didn't work. So in this kind of situation, where on the one hand you have the rise of a possible global dictatorship, and on the other hand, you already have some traces of what you would call post-capitalism. How can we make sure that this other direction is not used or reappropriated, like by Donald Trump, who is speaking about the universal basic income, which is not really a universal basic income, and so on? And how can we link towards that energy that out of the coronavirus crisis, after the world, after the coronavirus crisis, we actually succeed to build something what you call post-capitalism? And maybe one question connected to this, also, what could, at this moment, the institutions of the European Union do? You know, concretely, is it bonds, is it something else or whatever? What are the existing measures besides state of exception?
Okay, big questions, but that's what we're here for. Okay, first, there is an app that I know of, I'm sure there are others, in China that has really helped citizens of China avoid infection. What it does is using the surveillance state apparatus of the Chinese Communist Party, effectively, What it does, it knows, the system, like Google knows in the rest of the world, where each one of us are, whom we have met, in which places we have been, and whom we have visited. It knows from facial recognition what the probabilities are that somebody has had fever, and has also information about many, many individuals, about the tests that they've taken or not taken, or passed or not passed. So, as you approach Foursquare-like, you're moving in some direction, even as you are walking your dog, right? And this thing goes bing, turn left, because if you turn right, you increase the probability of catching it, because there are some people there in their homes, their rubbish bins. And that's an extremely useful app to have at a time like this. And it also would mean that if we all had it, come to think of it, it would reduce to some extent the reason to stay behind closed doors. If you had an app that told you, right, if you move in that direction, you're okay, and it was accurate. So assume it's accurate. Yeah? It's a machine that I want. I think we should all have. But at the same time, right, once the virus is over, who's going to stop them from using it from all sorts of other, for all sorts of other reasons? Right? To work out to what extent you enjoy a particular drink in order to sell you more of it, to even more sinister applications. It tells you if you move in that direction, you're about to enter a place where more people are more politically radical, so go away, otherwise we're going to arrest you. I think the only way of combining a post-Luddite acceptance of the machinery, of the apps, of the of these technologies, without living in Big Brother land, is to socialize those apps, to make sure that they do not belong either to the Communist Party or to Google or to Facebook. So that immediately takes you into post-capitalism. Immediately takes you into post-capitalism. So we have to start imagining corporations that function in a way that is not, that is wholly different to the notion of a corporation which is worked, in which people who work there do not own it, and where the ownership belongs to a tiny majority who haven't even visited the company. Because this is a large discussion, I just want to connect the technologies that we have now. So either we are Luddites and we ban all digital technologies, and we don't use this app today or similar apps to help us fight the corona outbreak, or we talk about moving beyond the capitalist mode of production, and that's post-capitalism. That's point number one. Point number two. Yes, many people say, oh, look, capitalism now has gone, has been suspended, and now we have socialism for all. Even the United States, you saw what happened with Boris Johnson. He nationalized all the railways today for 6 months. For 6 months, we'll go back. So in other words, he said to the private companies that bought the franchises and who are running a terrible railway system in Britain as a result of privatization, what he said to them is, okay, you can't make ends meet. We will pay for everything. So you will operate like branches of the state. And then when the coronavirus is finished, then we'll go back to privatization. That, I think, is the model. So what's happening here is the state is intervening on behalf of capital. That's not socialism. That has always been the case. You see, it is an awful and very dangerous myth that the state and capital have been opponents. This is a myth propagated by neoliberals or free marketeers of the lowest intellectual caliber, who've been saying that there is a state and there's private sector, and the two are clashing with one another. The best society is one where the state goes away, withers, not in the Marxian sense, but in the sense of privatizing everything, and everything happens by the private sector. Well, if there was no state, there would be no capitalism. Capitalism began because the king's men threw in Britain the peasants of the land, cleared the lands, and therefore created the first proletariat. If the landlords did not have the king's army behind them, there would be no capitalism. So the state has always either helped capitalism be created, like in China. The state, it's a state capitalism, but so is Germany. German capitalism was not spontaneously created. It was in Britain to a certain extent, with the help of the King's army. But in Germany, it was state enterprise. We are now going to move from feudalism to capitalism because the British have moved in that direction. Otherwise, we will lose the plot. So state and capital have always gone hand in hand. What is now happening is that the state is utilizing resources that the capitalists were telling us did not exist for public purpose. They are utilizing them supposedly for public purpose in order to save the banks, in order to save the airlines. So even the awful Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi and so on now in Congress, are opposing Trump's wholesale bailout of big business. Because you know what, there are only serious differences between the Democrats and the Republicans now in Congress. They're all for saving the large airlines, for instance. Trump wants to save them in secret. He wants to give billions to companies without it being known publicly who gets how many billions, and without putting any restrictions on them on using the money that they will get from the federal government to buy back their own shares to push their price and their bonuses up. So, but that, so let's be clear on this. In 2008, the USA became the USSA, the United Socialist States of America. As I was saying back then, the nationalizations that the Bush and then Obama government implemented were greater in proportion to America's size of the economy to the nationalizations that Lenin effected between 1917 and 1923. But of course, that lasted as long as it had to last to save capital, and then we went back to privatomania, to the return of privatization, not as a policy, but as a religion on behalf of the few. And now let me go to the final question. The question being, what should the European Union institutions be doing? Well, exactly the opposite of what they're doing. How about that? They should be doing none of what they're doing and something quite different. So what are they doing? Imagine that you have a patient who's been ill for a long while and you've been applying cortisone, and cortisone has not worked. It has sort of steadied the patient, but the underlying health, the fundamentals of the organs of the patient are getting worse and worse and worse. But the cortisone is simply keeping him sort of alive. Huh? And then suppose that suddenly there's a massive stroke or a massive problem deteriorating, making the patient even worse. And the doctor comes and says, oh, we need more cortisone. No, you don't need more cortisone. You need a complete, now, what is the equivalent of cortisone? Quantitative easing. So what they've been doing over the last 10 years is they've been pumping liquidity. They've been printing money and giving it to the banks. Okay, that's steady the banks. The banks were supposed to lend this money to businesses that would actually carry out investments. No, nobody was going to carry out investments because they knew that the many were suffering from austerity. The many would not have the money to buy goods and services, so they wouldn't be able to make a profit out of investing into real stuff. So instead of investing into real stuff, what did the large corporations do? Volkswagen, Siemens, Apple, Google, and so on, with all the money that the central bank was printing and giving to them, they took the money, free money, and bought their own shares. Because by buying their own shares, the share price went up. Bonuses are linked to share prices. That's it. So they all had a lot of money. The 0.1%, they bought more houses. They drove Berlin house prices through the roof. They created more inequality for Berliners. Same thing in Greece, and so on and so forth. So now we have the complete collapse of European capitalism. What are they doing? The same thing. Because we were having this discussion recently, that in answering your question, what should they be doing instead? I did a back of envelope calculation. Suppose they were going to give 2,000 euros to every European. To every European. You just give 2,000 euros to every member of a Eurozone member state. The ECB prints 750 billion. That's what it would take. And suddenly you wake up in the morning and each one of us has 2,000 euros in their account, right? And that, of course, is an immediate help. It helps people substitute lost income. It helps them buy stuff from their even, online shop nearby, making a payment for food to be delivered or goods to be delivered. That refloats some of the businesses. That's the most immediate, efficient, just way of printing money in order to refloat all boats at once. They didn't do that. But they did. I was astonished of the coincidence. I was talking about 750 billion for direct cash into people's bank accounts. Next day, Christine Lagarde announced 700, precisely the same number, 750 billion to be printed, to be given to the bankers as QE. So, two things we need. And that completes the answer of what the European Union institutions should do immediately. The European Investment Bank, which has been at the forefront of our DiEM25 policy in last May, the European Parliament election, when we were talking about the Green New Deal and how to fund it, we were saying that the European Investment Bank should be printing 500 billion worth of bonds every year, forever, with the European Central Bank backing them up, if needs be, in the secondary bond markets, so that we would have a fund of 500 billion every year for the green transition. Now we need to ratchet this up. This must become 1 trillion a year, and half of it must go to public goods, including health, and the other half should be going to green transition. That's one thing we should do. And the second thing we should do, they should print 750 billion and put 2,000 euros in every person's bank account and keep doing this every month, until we defeat the virus.
Okay, I can see that there are plenty of questions coming for you. So I will choose those questions. Some of them you already answered. By the way, I think I'll come to the questions in a second. The question of the state seems the most important one to me, which is coming back big time. A good friend of mine recently made a joke and said, as a Marxist, I'm really happy what's happening, but as an anarchist, I'm really worried about it. In the sense that it's really this kind of contradictory situation when it comes to the role of the state. But let me come to the questions, because people are watching from all over the world. This question, I think you already responded. The question is, what are the consequences of unlimited quantitative easing? I think you explained it already. Another question says, you mentioned bonds already, but another question says, maybe you could specify better what you mean by that. The question is the following one. Europe is talking about Corona bonds. Is that a good idea?
You can call them whatever you want. You can call them Corona bonds, you can call them Unity bonds, you can call them crazy bonds, call them whatever you want. The question is who issues them, okay? How much? And who gets the money, right? These three questions. I think that you don't need to be an economist to understand that. I had a lot of nonsense being talked about, especially in the financial press. This is where most nonsense comes from. About the use of the European Stability Mechanism. For those of you who don't know what it is the bailout fund. It's that awful, toxic, poisonous fund that was created in order to bail out Greece-like countries. Yes, that's not wrong. We don't want the ESM. The ESM is toxic. The bonds that it issues are like CDOs, like Lehman Brothers CDOs. I'm not going to go into the technicalities of this. Anything that the ESM touches dies. Set it aside. We should just dump it. We don't need it. We have the European Investment Bank. The European Investment Bank is there. It has the printing presses for issuing bonds. It's been doing it for decades. Because you see, if we set up some other Corona institution to issue bonds, that will take months because there is a technicality involved. So if you already have the EIB, why do you need something else? The EIB issues bonds on behalf of all of Europe. It's been doing it for years. So use that. Okay? What I would also do is I would create very quickly a European investment organization next door to EIB, to the European Investment Bank, because the EIB should collect the money and give it to the European investment organization to spend the money. When the Americans conducted and implemented the Marshall Aid Plan in the early 1950s, okay, they used US Treasury bonds, bills, to get the money from the United States, and they created something called the Organization of Economic the Organization of European Economic Cooperation in Paris, an organization for distributing that money, for giving grants, no loans, grants, which is what we want to do, and to target them for green transition, for education, for, of course, for health and so on. So that's what we need. If you want to call those Corona bonds, Corona EIB bonds, fine. We might as well talk about it that way. But who should get the money? It should go into green energy systems, because we need them anyway. And this is what will create the good quality jobs. While at the very same time, we should fund public hospitals everywhere. We should fund the production of pharmaceuticals utilizing public resources and not relying on the private pharmaceutical companies that are a scourge and have always managed to make a move out of the crisis against the interests of the many. We should fund education. We should fund, a 5G system that is free as a public utility. We understand today, when we're all locked up inside our homes, how important it is to have 5G that is like a public utility and not something that particular multinational monopolies are utilizing, when these days we all understand that our internet is just as much of a human right as clean water. And finally, the ECB should print money and give to everyone.
What we have seen, this is just my comment, and I go to a question which is connected to it. What we have seen with the coronavirus crisis, I can see it when I get out of my apartment, which is not so often these days. And we can only get out of the apartment if we go to the supermarket or to the hospital, or if you are in a company of less than 5 people. I'm in Austria at the moment, so hi from Vienna. What I have seen on the streets these days on Vienna are those people who are still working. You mentioned quality jobs. Whom I see on the streets, who are those people? They are waste collectors, shop assistants, drivers, and delivery people, and postmen. So basically we can see that all those parts of society which were pushed and even demonized to a certain degree, and they were the first victims of austerity and so on, are now the ones who are at the foreground of this crisis and who have the biggest risk to get infected. So there is a question which is connected to this, and it says, I would like Yanis to comment on how this crisis may question the sacred status of work. And I think it's a good question because it again brings us back to post-capitalism. Will this, to connect to this question, will this crisis actually help us to, I don't know, automate some of those jobs, but at the same time guarantee, as you said, a universal basic dividend? That's the question. I mean, I think what it shows is that that sacred place of work, today you can see you can work at home, millions of people are at home, everything changes. So the question, can you comment on how this crisis may question the sacred status of work?
Well, firstly, you just reminded me of a message I got, I think it was yesterday or the day before, from a checkout worker in a supermarket here in Greece. A desperate letter saying, to keep our jobs, we have to report at 6 in the morning until 11 at night, 7 days a week, because now supermarkets are open even on Sunday, due to the emergency. We deal with 1,000 people every day, which means the chances that we've been infected are very large, which means we cannot even, during the few hours we have at home, be with our loved ones, because we have to isolate from them. And therefore, we have a magnificent ratcheting up of the rate of exploitation of workers who are still at work. Is this crisis going to question the sanctity of work? Well, by the way, I don't believe in the sanctity of work. I believe in what William Morris used to say, that work, as long as it is not creative, should be avoided at all cost. At all cost, the right to laziness, when the alternative is a soul-destroying shit job that kills your spirit while you're doing it. This idea of the Stakhanovite idea that when you're working, you are being necessarily more virtuous than when you are reading a book or actually staring out of the window, is not one I ever had. Do I believe that this crisis is going to question that philosophical error? No, I don't think so. You know what, Srečko, and this is very important. I don't think this crisis is going to question capitalism at all, until and unless we do something about it. If movements like DiEM25 do not succeed in utilizing the present moment, in seizing the day, in carpe diem, in order to change the political equation, what's going to happen is this virus will die out, and we're going to go back to business as usual, only slightly worse than usual, with greater surveillance, with taller walls, with greater rates of exploitation of workers. You know, once workers have been put in a situation where they work from 6 in the morning to 11 at night, and they work on Sundays, it will take a massive movement to reverse the situation, not to move towards post-capitalism, but even to go back to where we were 2 months ago. So, comrades, I have bad news and good news. The bad news is that the world is not going to be made a better place automatically, just because we all learned some lesson. No, we learned the lesson in 2008. What happened? There was socialism everywhere for the bankers, and then it was all taken away, and there was 0-hour contracts for everybody immediately after that. So similarly here, fascism on the one hand, and financialization on the other are going to get a tremendous boost after the coronavirus scare is over, if we don't act.
Yeah, this brings me to the next question, which is also related to a question I had before. This situation that on the one hand, you have a rise of a state of exception, fascism, even global dictatorship. And on the other hand, that this is probably, as you said now, Yanis, an open historic situation, probably unprecedented in that sense. You know, still it's a small window of time, but still everything seems possible. You know, it can go in any direction. So the question is, from the audience, how are we going to ensure that democratic freedoms are not going to be lost after the corona crisis? So perhaps you could
Yes.
this situation, what to do, what is to be done?
We need to be vigilant. And we need to be ready to come down on them like a ton of bricks when they will try, and they will try, to make the restrictions on our civil liberties permanent. Orban has already, Orban is living the dream at the moment. In Budapest, he's having a party every night. Say, yeah, thank you, COVID-19. You've given me the excuse I've been seeking now for years to remove all civil liberties. So now there's martial law. I believe that in Hungary now, even if you can be accused of thinking of not helping the government, then you're out. So there's no doubt that power constantly looks for opportunities to become absolute and absolutely corrupt. This crisis, like every crisis, whether it's a war, a financial crisis, a bout of unemployment, migration, whatever it destabilizes everyday life, power will always seize upon it in order to extend and grow longer its poisonous tentacles by which to, grab the body corporate of civil society and make it its slave.
Let's move to other questions as well. So Louis de Guindos, I'm sorry if I pronounced it badly, but I'm from the Balkans, so you will excuse me, is now talking about, and you can put subtitles, is now talking about an emergency minimum wage. Is his idea the same as yours, and how is your idea different?
Well, Luis de Guindos was sitting next to me in the Eurogroup meetings. By the way, you can hear what he was telling me. If you go into euroleaks.diem25.org and you listen to those Eurogroup meetings of 2015, Luis de Guindos was the Spanish finance minister back then. He was sitting next to me. He was always more aggressive in public than Schäuble. He was out Schäubling Schäuble only because he was too scared that if we got away with a better deal from the European Union that he had done, then he would not be able to walk on the streets of Madrid. After that, but at the private level, we had good exchanges. Now, after that, he was rewarded for his steadfast defense of Schäublism by becoming the vice president of the European Central Bank. Now he's supporting a minimum wage. Well, it depends on how he thinks it should be funded. I'm all for a minimum wage, but with two caveats. First, when neoliberals like Luis talk about minimum wages, what they have in mind is a low minimum wage that is an excuse for doing away with trade union rights and with collective bargaining. So in the end, in a sense, the end of the Danish model, of the Swedish model of collective bargaining, even of the German model. Now that we don't want. If he's talking about a minimum basic payment to all citizens to be minted by the bank of which he is the vice president, I'm all for it. But I very much fear that people like Luis speak those words because they make them sound good. But when it comes to the crunch, in the meetings of the Board of Governors of the ECB, of the Eurogroup, silencio.
Thanks, Yanis. We are slowly coming to an end. And there is one question which is a great question for the end. Although it's not the end, there is a world outside of YouTube and self-isolation. And the question is the following one. I think it's a question many people today, not only in Europe, but everywhere, have on their lips. The question is, what can we as citizens do for actions, considering we are most of us in self-isolation? What can Italians, Germans, French, and all others do besides talking here about it? That's the question. I would say you could join DiEM25, but besides just talking, what could we do?
Look, it sounds self-serving for me and for you to say join DiEM25, but it is the only answer we can give you. Seriously. Because, for those who don't know, Sergio and I'm not talking to Sergio, I'm talking to everybody else. Sergio and I met in 2015, September, in Berlin, and we were scratching our heads with exactly the same question. Europe is fragmenting. Its ethic is nowhere to be seen. Its peoples are being turned against one another. Fascism is going to rise up at any moment now. This is what we were talking about, about opposite the Volksbühne in that not very nice cafeteria. And we decided that, look, the only thing that can stop all this is something we've never had before in Europe. And that is a truly transnational, pan-European, progressive movement. So that we belong to that and to keep pressurizing, and we belong to it not as Germans, not as Greeks, not as Italians, not as Croatians, but as Europeans, as citizens of Europe. Because the bankers are completely united. Look at them now. Totally united. And they're totally served by the organs of the European Union. The fascists, totally united. Orbán, Le Pen, they're all, one thing, AfD. They are one solid agglomeration. We progressives, we are pathetic. Look at the European Parliament elections last year. We didn't manage to bring people together. But we cannot bring people together across Europe by creating alliances between national parties, between a progressive party in Greece and the progressive party in Germany, and so on. Look at the European Party of the left. It's a complete disaster. And can only be a disaster because they don't have a common program and they don't have a common manifesto. They can't agree on what to put to their people as one solid European thing. And this is why we created DiEM25. In DiEM25, okay, we're not very strong. We have 120,000 members. We got 1.5 million votes in the May 2019 election. But the idea was right. The idea of coming together as citizens of DiEM25 in Europe and creating one agenda that we push for in Germany, in Greece, in Italy, in Belgium, in Ireland, in Britain, everywhere at once. I still think this is the only way of proceeding. If we don't succeed in doing that, we will just fail. So join DiEM25.
Thanks, Yanis. But so that everyone who is watching us doesn't think that these days we will talk just about DiEM25, although this program is launched by DiEM25, let me just announce who are the next guests. They are not all of them politicians or representatives of movements. We have really inspiring guests who are coming, and I hope some of them might also answer some of these questions. So tomorrow already, by the way, this event here has twice as much, and I think even more people than at the Volksbühne, which was 1,000 or something. So I think don't underestimate, this is a response to the question from the audience of us coming together online. I mean, as long as there is internet still. I think we are building now the foundations after we get out of self-isolation, and actually self-isolation is helping us to get closer. So to announce tomorrow, I mean, Yanis will join us in the next sessions as well. Maybe sometimes he will appear like Marshall McLuhan in Woody Allen's Any Hall. We will just call him and he will appear. That's the beauty of this. I mean, we can do whatever we want with this format. So tomorrow we have our good friend from India, Vijay Prashad, who will talk about the global geopolitics, economy, and the people, and also basically answer some of these questions, how to resist in these times. The day after, on the 25th, on Wednesday, every day at 7 p.m. Central European Time, I'm really glad to have Larry Charles with me. It will be a conversation between me and him. This is the very inspiring co-creator of Seinfeld, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and many other inspiring projects. The topic is hope and humor in times of coronavirus. So to show how much humor and jokes are important. The day after, because we never forget about our friends, our guest, special guest will be John Shipton, the father of Julian Assange, who is at the moment at high security prison in Belmarsh, London. If there is one person who knows very well what self-isolation means, or isolation to put it more precisely, that's Julian Assange, who has been 7 years at the Ecuadorian embassy and now is under an existential threat if the coronavirus spreads through the prisons. That will be the topic on the day after. The day after, we have Saskia Sassen, a good friend of ours, advisory panel member of DiEM25, academic, who will also try to present some hope. And then on Saturday, we have something what we call Saturday Special. There will be a pre-recorded video premiered with Noam Chomsky on the coronavirus situation. And afterwards, I will be joined by my dear friend, Gael Garcia Bernal, to speak about love in times of coronavirus. The program goes on also next week and so on. I don't have time to announce it. Please register because you will get information directly to your email. You have a chance to post questions. I'm really sorry that I didn't post questions from everyone. There is just not enough time, but we will do it next time. And Yanis will be back with a special guest as well, but we will not announce it. At the end, I would remind to our new slogan, which is unify or die. Yanis, do you have a message for the end for people in self-isolation or those who will watch us later?
We continue. We refuse to stay silent, and primarily, we keep having fun by imagining, because that is a revolutionary act, how we can continue to live well after all these failures of both our movements and the powers that be.
Thanks a lot, Yanis. Thanks everyone who watched us tonight. Tomorrow at 7 o'clock at this same place in the world after coronavirus.